Hi, this week on the Inspiring Individual series, we're truly honored to have Mr. Ong Eng Bin, the Chief Executive Officer of OCBC Malaysia, as our guest. Mr. Ong joined OCBC in 1988 as a management trainee and rose to the very top of the career ladder. In this interview, he shares his nuggets of wisdom on moving up the ranks in your career, the skills, the values you need to do well in your career, as well as his philosophy on wealth building. He's a truly fascinating man. You don't want to miss out on this one. Alright, welcome Mr. Ong. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, you can tell us a little bit of your background. I read that you joined OCBC in 1988 as a management trainee, and now you've rose all the way up to the top of the career ladder. And just talk about your career trajectory so far.
Thank you, Jonathan, for inviting me here. Well, I should also start from the very beginning when I first worked. It was actually in PwC.
Okay.
It was Pricewaterhouse. Although I was there for only just less than 2 years, but I made a lot of friends and continued to keep them. And that's where I met my wife.
Okay.
So actually, Pricewaterhouse was the first place that actually taught me a little bit about everything, because I was in audit. And in audit, I audited people like Shoemaker, Marco Shoe, I'm not sure whether they're still around, to companies that produce aluminum foils and all that. So that's where you actually see a lot of differences in companies, the diversity, the people that you deal with, the management style and all that. But obviously, banking was obviously my first love. So when opportunity came, and OCBC was a client of PwC, and I audited it for a few times before I joined them. So I really sort of know a little bit of the background of OCBC when I joined them in 1988. I was part of their management trainee program, and I remember the bunch of us were interviewed in a group.
Okay.
They didn't have time to actually interview us individually, so we were all asked to speak and come up with ideas, what do you think, and all that, to see how we communicate, how we present ourselves. So fortunately, I prepared myself ahead because I knew there was tough times in 1988. So I got recruited together with 7 other people, and I chose what I wanted to do, which was corporate banking, and I've been in corporate banking for many, many years until they appointed me to a bigger role in business banking. I found that being in business banking itself exposes you to a lot of opportunities. You know a lot of different industries, different people, and corporations are the life of any economy. Behind corporations are people. Relationships are built, and there are so many things that you can offer a client, and the bank is the right place to be. And of course, in 1990, 2 years after I joined the bank, I was posted to Johor Bahru. That's where I experienced branch banking, which is actually a totally different kind of cup of tea. It's a place where this is the heart of business. The customers will come in, while they are doing their banking they'll come in for a chat, and they'll tell you about certain things, and this is where you get to know them a lot better. You build extensive relationship, and you learn how to manage a diverse group of people. When I was in Johor Bahru, Johor Bahru was just developing. It was a little bit of a cowboy place. Not a lot of infrastructure, but a lot of activities. And we were very near to Singapore, which is our head office. We had a lot of Singapore clients always coming to invest, and they're very demanding, as usual. So it gives me an opportunity to actually work very closely with people from Singapore, people in head office, and people in the branch. And that's where I realized that one of the key importance is working well with people. It will get you far. You must be helpful, you must understand, and you must care for their needs. And I had a very interesting manager at that time. He was a so-called good manager to a certain extent. He told us once that the best manager is the most useless manager. So at that time, at the age of 28, I was asking him, what do you mean by that? He said, well, what I want to do is to be able to be not here, and you guys, all the heads in the branch, can still function. So I'm going to train you to be able to function without me. And that's where, and then he said, when you see clients, you can go and see clients without me. If I'm busy, I won't join you. In those days, branch managers are the so-called taiko of the branch. So they will always say that any customer, I must know. I must see the customer. I'll pass the deal to you. I control the flow. But this manager was very, very different, Mr. Ang. He actually gave us an opportunity to really become more independent. And over time, I realized that by doing so, customers also have confidence in you because you're forced to really make decisions. Customers start seeing you instead of seeing the manager. And I think that also prepared me to take more things because you are forced to go see customers yourself, think out a strategy, and then he will help me when I need support from head office and all that. Well, fast forward to my recent role as a CEO. I think it happened in 2014. I was very happy just assuming the role of business banking head for 2 years. And of course, Jeffrey Chew, the then CEO, decided after 6 years with the bank as a CEO, he wanted to try something different, property.
Okay.
And the opportunity came. I was quite comfortable doing what I was doing. But I realized that there are things that maybe you should do outside what you are comfortable in, which I've been doing for the last 20 over years. And speaking to him and the sharing that he gave me the sense that I think there are opportunities to grow yourself and also to help people grow and perhaps to also steer the bank in the right direction that you feel that the bank could do better. At that time, there were quite a lot of changes in the bank. Our CFS consumer head also just resigned, and our risk head also had to leave for personal reasons. And I thought maybe I should just stay where I am. But that created probably less opportunities for people that work with me. So I said, well, maybe you shouldn't be so selfish and just be comfortable what you're doing because you don't want to prevent people from moving up. So I took that role. And I would say the last 3 years has been very interesting and very challenging, which is one of things that I wanted to share is that if you look at banking and the Malaysian economy, banking is something that you're very dependent on the economy, how the economy performs, how the bank performs. To a certain extent, we influence the economy, the economy influences. And up until 2013, I think we had a very benign economy, always growing. Then, of course, after that, we had the GST, which is necessary, but at the same time, it causes a huge taxation on business, consumer, and everything. And then we had the commodity price dipping, the CPO, the oil price. So government household debt also very high. So it came a time where business were a little bit more challenging. And I think the bank, after growing many, many years at a very fast pace, realized that we cannot grow at that kind of level, which may not be sustainable from a perspective of there's just not so many people buying properties anymore. There are not so many investment in oil and gas anymore. So what do you do? So the bank focused on growing certain things that will sustain us until the next cycle came out. So one of the issues that we faced was how to deal with a period of low growth. That I would say is one of my biggest challenge.
Was it the
as
most
a CEO,
challenging time for us?
Definitely, because I'm also new in the job, and I think one of the things that I know is that the first 1 or 2 years is actually you're just getting used to how to get everything in order, how to trust people, who are the ones that you can trust, who can deliver, and dealing with all types of stakeholders, the regulators, our board, our head office, and all that. So, thankfully, I'm blessed by a good team. And the OCBC culture is pretty defined, so you know what you can do, what you can't do. And we have a fairly understanding board that also guides us in terms of strategy, what to do, what not to do. So I would say that we are in the phase now that the so-called the tougher times are over, and this also coincides with the fact that the Malaysian economy is starting to recover. We're not entirely out of the woods, but you can see that the exchange rate is starting to stabilize a bit. The exports are coming back. So in the sense that we have prepared ourselves well, we manage our costs fairly well. We are a bank that cares for employees, so we never want to consider things like retrenchment, VSS or MSS. We don't do that. We are always constantly growing. Even where you sometimes see banks consolidating and closing branches, we are always growing our branches. So this year alone, the second half, we're opening 2 branches, and next year we're opening at least another 2 branches. So we always tell our staff that if you're willing to take on new challenges, there's always a role. And OCBC has a fairly good structure where we have a new employee value proposition. We call it "we see you, we hear you," and everything. Partly what we are saying is that and this caters and resonates to a lot of our Gen-Y. Although we are a very old organization, we've been around almost like 100 years. But the fact is, 60% of our staff are so-called the Gen-Ys, people below 35. And we realized that we got to reorientate our so-called HR and the way we engage our staff.
Was this initiated by you when you?
This was a group-wide. So the senior management of the bank in all over OCBC, including Malaysia, had a role to play. And one of the things that we do is to make sure that we allow our young people who want to try something different. Because sometimes when you, like you say, Jonathan, you're just 1 year in the bank, in an organization, you really don't know what part of the staff, for instance, you are keen to work in. Is it in this kind of area or something? But you wouldn't mind trying out new areas. So we have a new thing that we start, which is called Explore, meaning that you may be hired for operations technology, but if you really like something outside in treasury, you can try for a few months, and then you can come back. So you learn something different. So this is something that we introduced. We've always had for almost a decade, a policy where we allow staff to rotate. But to minimize disruption, we insist that you must be at least 2 years in a given job, so that you don't cause too much uncertainty and disruption. So and this is something that is shared every week, every Friday. Opportunities in Malaysia, the group are open. So if you find something that you like, and they say that you have the right skills and they want to hire you, within 2 months you can move to the new place. So that gives us an opportunity to tell our staff that if you are tired of doing something, and there's opportunity elsewhere, you can go for it. And that is something that has helped us very well. We try to fill a lot of positions internally instead of externally, because we have a fairly strong culture, and we need to continue to maintain a culture that is truly OCBC lah.
And what would you say is your leadership style? Because you talk about your manager, Mr. Ang, who says that to be a good manager, he has to be a useless one, and in the sense that everyone works independently. But you look at a lot of big organizations, they are emphasizing strongly on the mentorship programs and things like that. What about OCBC? Do you prefer your subordinates to work independently, or you like to micromanage?
I think what we try to do is choose the right people in the jobs and trust them, and then monitor them. You always must be able to give them a free hand to do certain things, give them flexibility because you should be result oriented. For younger people, especially, I think where you may want to reach out to, you always want to impress on them that even though you're a trainee, let's say you just joined the bank, it also is so-called incumbent on you to think like a leader. But what do you mean by being a leader? It means that you be the leader, but you don't have a title. Means that we need leadership in simple things like coming to work early, on time, okay, things like that. Finishing a job that is given on time. Making sure that your assignment it doesn't have mistakes, simple mistakes, for instance. So once you are able to be trusted on things like this, I think people will give you more opportunities to to grow, either to help mentor somebody. And when we recruit people, we always want to have them have a buddy so that they can also learn faster. And it's a win-win situation where people who mentor you, you are also helping them. So it's incumbent on them to teach you fast and to help you assimilate into the job and grow faster. My style is always to listen to people, because in every organization, sometimes what really makes a difference is asking questions, because they probably know most of the stuff. Is that, do they see the connection in certain businesses? Even when I speak to many corporate leaders, very often, especially entrepreneurs, they always tell me that it's very difficult for them to let go. And the reason why they don't do that is because they feel that sometimes these people only, they are so-called C-suite or whatever, see this part, but don't see the last part. And sometimes as a boss or owner, they don't tell their people everything. That's something that they always keep within them. And that's why sometimes they don't see it. So as a CEO, I think my job is to really teach them and help them to understand the whole process and be as transparent as possible. Why we want to do it, why we need to do it, so they get the buy-in from them. I always believe that if you want to sort of steer certain thing in the right direction, whether it's something doing, making them see something that is they have not seen yet, you have to first convince them that it's better for them. And sometimes you need their buy-in, because if they don't really support you, but they're just following your orders, but internally their mind is not on it, you won't achieve success. So sometimes it's better to really get people to agree with you, and you maybe get 6 out of 10 things done, but they're happy doing it, rather than you ask them to do 10 things, everything you want it to be done, and they're not happy doing it. So I'm always a believer that I think it's not a compromise, it's a win-win. It's a win-win where we take into consideration their concerns, their challenges, their fears. Sometimes people can't do certain things, partly because their skill set. Also, it could be the organization itself. So you can't ask the impossible from them. You must be authentic in your approach. Let's say you really care for them and you want them to succeed. And OCBC has also a tagline, which is actually something that we hold very dear, is that we want to help people succeed, whether they are our staff or our customers or our stakeholders. So this is something that in everything that we do, we think of how we can do that.
And throughout your illustrious career now, you've seen, you started from as a management trainee right up the way as a CEO. What do you see in the C-level executives now? What really separates them in terms of the values and the characteristics they have that help them, spearhead their careers to the top, as compared to the the average employee. Yeah.
I think generally one is that you must deliver good results. Second, I think to really have that energy, you must have the drive and passion. There are people who have the skills, the smarts, but they don't have the drive. They're comfortable where they are. And that's where either by accident they may go up because they play a bit of politics or whatever. But the really people who can succeed and thrive and have that energy are people who are passionate about what they're doing. The reason why I say that is because whenever you're at the C-suite level,
Right.
I can tell you that there is the glory and there are a lot of hardships and there are a lot of frustrations because big organizations in a big place and in a volatile economy that's always going up and down, there are always a lot of challenges. So you must take the good and the bad. And sometimes if you only sign up for the good times, it's like a marriage.
Yeah.
No marriage is always perfect, maybe during courting days. But reality is that there's always the bills, the housework, and stuff like that. So you must have that drive and passion to say, okay, I want to do this. And this has to be beyond sort of glory. And I think it really helped me as a CEO because I also find times of frustrations. And sometimes you can't share with everyone. And what keeps you going? Why do you want to continue? You could retire. You could, things like that. But what makes you want to continue is because you think that what you're doing is meaningful. You can do a lot of good for the organization, for the staff, and for the customers. So for people who want to strive to be that level, don't go for glory. First, be good at what you do and make sure they're consistent. And don't be too impatient for growth because there are people who want to get to the top very young. I mean, I don't know how old you are, probably 25?
24.
24, yeah, right? The way things are going, I think the United Nations say that youth, the new category of youth is up to 65 years, So you have 40 years of working. So the question then is, if in 5 years you become a CEO, what next, right?
Yeah.
Many people nowadays want to be CEO at a very early age. That's why they go and set up new companies. They work for a few years with a big organization. After that, they go and do something different. So they have a good title. But the reality is that do they know enough about what is needed to succeed? What are the setups, the frameworks that is required to have a sustainable business? And I think for young people who aspire to be CEOs or go up the C-suite, a couple of things is necessary. Do something that you really like because that will drive you. And when you go up there, think of what is keeping you passionate about your work. And it has not got, it cannot be just purely, okay, I'm recognized, I got more money. Because many times you have a lot more money, but you don't really have the time to spend it. Right? Okay. And be someone that continually think about how, from your position, you can help people to grow. Then people will continue to support you because they know that whatever you try to do is to help them to succeed. And hopefully it's a win-win. I give you an example. We have started this because I also spent some time in the branch. I realized that over time, everything tends to be headquarters-centric. And recently, last few years since I became CEO, we tried to do more things at the branch. And we needed to tell people that, yes, banking has become more specialized. If you're a mortgage person, you just want to do mortgage so that you're very good at it, right? But the bank is more than just mortgage. How do you tap all the customers that a mortgage person had brought in? Because the bank doesn't sell mortgages.
Yeah.
So we wanted to create a culture of collaboration.
Yeah.
But collaboration is something that people think that, I'm doing my job, I'm so successful, I get so much income just doing this. Why should I do something different?
Yeah.
But when economy is slower, you find that these are the things that is going to sustain you, because you may not have so many mortgages, but what can you sell? And we create a culture of mutual dependence, the collaboration where I have a consumer customer, you have a business banking customer, we work in the same branch, and he is not banking with OCBC in his consumer side. His personal thing is with another bank, but his business is with us. We create a win-win situation, everybody, and I think it's something that people are starting to realize the benefits and making it easier for them to really collaborate more.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I wanted to leave in the bank is that we have a really good culture of collaboration that is well executed. Because collaboration is like cliche, like everybody wants to talk about that. But how do you really execute? How do you make sure that it's easy for the introducer? Because if I introduce you to somebody and the person within the bank screws up, I'll think twice. And then you may complain to me. I introduce you to this guy never called me for 1 week. Then I'll think twice before I do it. So I think it's easier said than done. The executing part is the key and everybody knows that they should do it better. And I'm a firm believer that practice makes perfect. And if you do it more often, it becomes easy. You also need to track them. It should be system. It should not be buku lima and all that. It has to be system so that people can track. So it's still work in progress. The next 3 years will see us taking a little bit more so-called maturity of this collaboration efforts. And I think that will give us a real sustainable business and something that I think works well for our staff, the bank, as well as our customers. Therefore, they feel that they're really one with the organization in everything.
Very interesting. But more than just values, if you were to advise young people, say a bunch of management trainees just joined OCBC, what skill set would you encourage them to pick up that will help them in the long run?
Okay, I think I would say the current crop of young people that we have, they're already very knowledgeable. I think definitely I have a son who's already 20 years old, and he's next year probably joining the job market. But they are fairly well exposed. They know a lot. The internet has really opened their ability to connect and all that. Now, the question then is that they're already very knowledgeable. How do you make that knowledge beneficial to any organization they join? Okay, and I think one advice I would say in the first few years of your job, be very, very open to all ideas. Connect yourself to everyone. Let's say even if you're hired into any area, in the staff, for instance, or in OCBC, make sure you understand outside your chosen area. But first of all, be good in what you do. Okay? If you're assigned in technology, be good in that. But don't be in a silo. We actually have a program where we identify people, we call it a deep reach. So if you do well in what you do, you will be spotted. And definitely we may not tell you, but definitely we'll say, this guy is very good in this. Let's see what he can do, and maybe 5 years later we try to let him do something else, he or her lah. Secondly is that it's probably my advice to people who think that by moving jobs they can fast track their career. While it's true in terms of paycheck, but the reality is there's always a trade-off in terms of whatever you built as goodwill in an organization. You see, the reason why I say that is that, let's say if you work 5 years with an organization, OCBC, and you've been doing well, people know you. Suddenly you go to, and sometimes that itself makes you want to be trying something different. You think that, okay, I'm doing so well, and maybe I should try something different. And you move to another place. You actually sort of lose that goodwill, that and the network and the connection that you have already built. And that is something that you can't always replace. And I can guarantee you in a career, you will never have a career that keeps going up. There'll be times that you have a setback, and if you have got goodwill deposits in an organization, you'll find that the organization is probably more willing to recognize your contribution. I do not talk about resting on your laurels, but the fact is, do not underestimate the fact that longevity actually helps you. Because to navigate complex organizations, you really need to know a lot more. Do not be a little bit what they call mercenary. That means I just go, whoever pays me better, I will go. I'm doing the same. I don't mind doing the same. I would advise young people not to fall into the trap of saying, okay, I'm a RM handling corporate banking. If somebody pays me better, I will just go there. Because I'm still doing, I have not really elevated myself. But importantly, if you make that decision to move or stay, think at your organization whether they are organization that is progressive. The last thing you want to do is in an organization that is not progressive. And one of the reasons I stayed very long in OCBC is partly because as an organization, I've actually witnessed many changes. Many CEOs in Malaysia, in Singapore, and a lot of developments. All the time, OCBC has been very progressive. So you can learn a lot without really moving. But you must want to be able to tap into that. And in any given area, think outside your own core expertise. And I think go in an organization where they are willing to expose you, to try out young talents. I think nowadays, I would say management recognize that you don't need to wait 30 years to be a CEO. Many young people become CEO at a much earlier age. In fact, you look at some of the banks, they have people who are CEOs in their 40s and all that. So I think young people have a good chance. They just need to be open-minded, have a bit of patience, and they will get there.
And you talked just now a little bit about, if you have a really huge income but you have no time to spend, piggyback off that, what you said, work-life balance is a very huge thing among Gen-Ys. We often hear about complaints about Gen-Ys not wanting to work past 6 p.m. and stuff like that. Whereas the older generation is, you have to put in the hours, you have to work 12 hours, 14 hours a day if you want to rise up to the top. As for yourself, how do you manage that, being a family man as well as a CEO of a huge organization?
I think we can always work more effectively. It doesn't mean that if you work until 10 o'clock, that is something that is desired. There are people who can accomplish a lot of work within their hours, 6, 7 or whatever. If you are at maybe a more senior level, the unfortunate thing is that there are many management meetings internally, externally, and stuff like that. So, like it or not, you realize that you have work, you have meetings, you have engagements. It's not something that your family or spouse really fully understands, okay. So, but that's a trade-off. And I think what what you need to do is to say, when you have opportunities for time, make sure that you spend with them. It's never an easy thing. I don't really play golf, for instance, because I know that if I were to do that, I think my weekends will also be taken up. As it is, sometimes my weekends also are on engagements and so that. For young people, I believe that it's okay to want to go to work at 9 and come back at 6. I think you don't owe the organization longer, but you do owe the organization while you're at work to be fully concentrated. OCBC is actually quite progressive in the sense that you can access Facebook even in the office because we don't sort of block you out. But we need people to be disciplined, that you sort of observe what you need to do. And we're also having flexi hours, stuff like that. So I think we recognize that the new millennial workforce, information availability is there. There are many ways to work better. A bank is something like a factory as well. We produce tons of documents. And some of these can be done, let's say, online. Digitize the business. For customers, don't have to walk to the bank. So clearly, I think it's probably something that we can tell the millennial workforce, don't worry, you get your 9 to 5. We also want our 9 to 5. In fact, when I first worked in the bank, we used to work until Saturday as well. Saturday was a half day, and by the time we come back, now we're only 9 to 5, and we have lots of holidays. So Gen-Y can still benefit from work-life balance. At the same time, they can be very productive. And I don't think that is a trade-off.
All right. And you talk about Malaysian economy seeing improvements. What about the property market for 2017 and 2018? What's your forecast on the market?
Okay. I think there has been some consolidation, and partly due to the fact that I think the government across the globe are looking at how property prices are determine your standard of living. If property prices keep going up while wages are growing slower, you find that it's an affordability problem, and it's a fundamental issue. And that's why I think the government is making a lot of efforts to create affordable housing, to make it more easy for people, to set up transportation systems that allow people to so-called reach office without having to buy more cars and clog up the roads and stuff like that. So there is, if you think about what the government has been trying to do in the last 10 years, is to allow people to have easy access to everywhere, and make houses more affordable, or at least increase the purchasing power of the general population, the workforce. I believe that property market will always be there, and over the longer term, it will always increase its value because land is scarce. Good locations are always in demand. I joined the workforce in 1986. I remember my pay was only 700 ringgit, I remember. And a house in Taman Tun costs about 150,000. Now a similar house costs about 10 times more. And it's also had its up and down over the last 30 years. But if you ask me, the long-term growth is there. So the only thing as an individual, at what time do you want to be in the market? And do you want to be in a market where you are an investor as a user? Because property, the basic thing is, if you don't have a house, you should have a house. But you have a house, you buy a house when you can afford it. And when can you afford it is a question of what is your disposable income and the trade-offs. Do you buy a car, or if you get a property that's at a mass transport zone where you don't have to a car, or you can use other means. So you have to do a trade-off. But I believe the property market is starting to turn. I think one thing we see is that the household debt is now stabilized for the last few years. It's still high at about 80s, but it's stabilized.
Yeah.
And I think there is still a lot of demand, but because people maybe have a lot of properties, sometimes they can't get the financing.
Yeah.
One thing is that developers are very strong these days. The ability to come up with innovative products
Yeah.
to help to sell the properties is getting better.
Yeah.
I would say that property market is always a business that will never go out of fashion like banking.
Yeah.
You may have high tech and all that, but everybody at the end of the day, the high tech billionaire will always want a house.
Yeah.
You know, they also want a bank.
So in regards to wealth building, what would you advise young people to do and not do so that they can build their wealth?
Okay. I think for those who are fortunate enough to, let's say, have parents who have taken care of a lot of things for them, they don't have to worry about it. It can be a bit challenging because they are accustomed to certain lifestyles that the parent give them.
Yeah.
So I would say that good and bad things sort of hatch during that time. But if you are those that are smart and not that rich, I would say that what you should do is not to be too distracted by what other people do. I have this motto, which sounds a little bit old-fashioned, but is basically telling people to live below their means. Meaning that if you can afford something, try not to do that if you can't. It requires a lot of determination, and sometimes people look at you and say, hey, you know, why like that? But I found that that's helped me very well. One is you got to be a little bit confident at yourself. You should not be worried about driving a car that people say, hey, you should be driving a Mercedes.
Yeah.
Why are you driving a Toyota or a NASA? Things like that. So it requires a lot of confidence and determination. But one thing I find is that really gives you a little bit of flexibility, because savings is something that and investing is one of the core things that you got to train yourself. There are people, I can tell you that there are people who earn a lot of money, but they are in high debt. And that's not because they don't have earning power. It's their lifestyle has sort of being accustomed to a certain level, and they can't control it. And they also, as a youngster, you are just in charge of yourself. But if you didn't control yourself, as you have children, you try to give them everything, then you realize that you set away, you sort of unleash some runaway things that very hard to close once you open it. If the children are accustomed to international school, for instance, when you can't afford it, you've had it. You know, every child has to go to international school. So I think habits should be formed very early. It's a little bit like party spoiler, party pooper. You know, don't tell me to go out and clubbing and all that. But there are things, you want to hang out with your friends, you don't have to go to a pub. You can go to a teh tarik mamak store. You can probably sit there for 2 hours. I always tell my son that you know, and mama nowadays are also 24 hours, right? So I think have a discipline. But the truth is actually the ability to really save will only come when you have a certain discretionary income. When you're earning below a certain amount, there's not that much you can save, but you can start a habit. But frankly, there's nothing, when you're building your wealth, there's nothing better than actually, besides investing well and all that, it's actually invest in your career. I found that if you focus, your career is your biggest income generator. You know.
And lastly, one last question before you go. If you could turn back time, having already experienced all that you have experienced, if you could turn back time to when you just started off, which is probably in 1986, what would you do differently?
Okay. I probably would still join OCBC.
Okay.
All right. Because I think it's an organization that is fairly progressive. I think in terms of work-wise, no major regrets, but possibly in some of the things that I do, dealing with certain customers, perhaps one should be more careful and not always be too optimistic about the future. Certainly, the oil and gas sector, for instance, for many companies and for many banks, is an issue because people were too optimistic.
Yeah.
So I think we have to always make sure that it's another old age thing. Don't put too many eggs in one basket. Some of my investments have turned out to be pretty rubbish, partly because I've always think that I'm right.
Yeah.
So never be too confident of yourself. Even my son also told me that was a bad investment decision, and it's true. And therefore, diversify in banking, in investments. These are the things that you learn.
All right, and we have reached the end of our program. Mr. Ong, thanks so much for joining us and sharing your nuggets of wisdom. We certainly wish you the best for the second half of 2017 for yourself and OCBC as well. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Guys, thanks for joining us once again. We hope you enjoyed the program. For more videos like this, hit the subscribe button or give us a like on our starproperty.my Facebook page. As always, I'm Jonathan Roberts from Star Property TV. See you next time.